Hello everybody, my name is Grayson Shore, and this is
Duncan Miller.
Thank you. Who likes batteries? You can have your batteries, yeah? All right, yes. Awesome, you were in the right place. This is not the quilting convention, so you're in the right spot. Battery hand up. My name is Grayson Shore, and I'm the founder of the PNW Battery Collaborative. And Duncan will give his introduction here in a moment, but we want to first say thank you for coming out tonight. I know we have some excellent speakers lined up, and it's going to be a fun evening. We promise pizza is on the way, so there'll be a pizza arriving, and we have time at the end of the presentations tonight for more snacks and meeting new friends and enjoying some pizza as well. So just to run through, what is our event agenda today? So first, we're going to start off with some opening remarks by Duncan and I. Then we're going to go through our lightning talks with our wonderful speakers here. And then we'll have some time for moderated Q&A and some audience Q&A, so start thinking of some good questions now. And then we'll have some time for upcoming events, and we'll conclude with some more free time with pizza and what have you as well. Duncan, over to you.
Thanks, Grayson. First, we just wanted to thank our great partners for the event that's happening tonight. And Catherine from Prosper Portland, do you want to come up and say a word about Prosper Portland?
Thought it was later. Okay, who's excited about the first battery meetup in Portland? Yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully it's the first of many. Hey guys, so I work for Prosper Portland, and I don't know if you knew, but the city has a liaison to companies in clean tech and climate tech, and that's me. I've got some postcards and business cards back there, but basically, you can see me as a free resource connector. Especially if you're a company, you work for a company, and you want to know what resources there are in Portland about to get connected to different initiatives going on. That's me. And I wanted to mention there's a few things going on that are just good to know about. So many folks know, and folks in this room are part of PowerEyes Northwest. So PowerEyesNW.com is the website. And this is a consortium of energy storage companies in the smart grid, distributed energy resource space. And it's a bi-state consortium with Washington State. It's a partnership with UW, PSU, OSU, U of O on the cybersecurity side of things. So we're really looking at advancing technology, interoperability for the grid and for energy storage solutions. I'd recommend going to that website, checking that out. And then we have got some partners here tonight. We have a meetup happening on May 13th, actually during OSEA. So if you go to OSEA and you're like, oh, hey, you can want to go to a different kind of meetup, there's going to be meetup May 13th on Central East Side at SkipTech and Continuous Solutions have a space together with Latino founders in the Central East Side. So we're going to have a big community celebration there. I should come check that out. And yeah, otherwise I just say, check out the website I have going on. It's like a resource for the industry here. And yeah, if you are like, hey, I'm looking for help in this, come talk to me. And I think that's it. Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you.
Yeah, peace and love, guys. And thank you to Prosper Portland for sponsoring our food and pizza, which was here soon. The other sponsor I just wanted to say a word about is the Metro Region Innovation Hub. I am a startup founder, co-founder and CEO of Rose City Robotics, but I'm also working with the Metro Innovation Hub, whose space we're using here tonight. And they were nice enough to donate that space for us. And I'm working as a community liaison for that group. And it's a new group, it's just been funded out of Business Oregon. And their goal is to create a map, an ecosystem map of all the resources available to entrepreneurs here in Portland and in the metro area. And so they have this really cool service that's called the Navigator Service, and it's free. You can go to their website, just Google it, and sign up with a navigator. They have 2 different navigators, and you can meet with them, tell them about your business, what you're working on, any problems that you're having, and they will connect you to resources in the area that can help you and people. And so it's a really great resource. It's free. and you should check it out if you have any interest, if you're starting a business or if you're already running a business. And then also that goes for PSU. Also, this is a PSU building. And then we had great support from our partners at Upstart Collective and Climate Curious for the event and for getting the word out and bringing a lot of you folks here. It's really great to see such a big audience. So let me hand it back to Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, Duncan. Perfect. All right. What is the Pacific Northwest Battery Collaborative? I already introduced myself here on the left, but I'll read our mission statement here on the right. So we're a collaborative community of battery entrepreneurs, scientists, policymakers, and enthusiasts united to make the PNW the United States leading hub of battery innovation. Does that sound awesome? Right? I would just point out, being from the West Coast, but having spent a lot of time living out on the East Coast, I recently moved back not too long ago and was blown away by how much awesome innovation is happening here in the PNW on batteries and the adjacent industries that support it as well. But I think maybe it's something with the cloudy weather or the rain. I feel like we're really humbling. We don't talk about it much, what we're doing, so the rest of the country doesn't know how much we're kicking butt on this stuff. And so the PNW Battery Collaborative also has in its mission is to make the rest of the country, ideally the rest of the world, aware of the amazing work that we're doing here. And also by making it even better by bringing our community closer together like we're doing here tonight. So some examples of how we've been doing that over the past couple of months. We've hosted over 600 people in the last few months at a variety of events. There's seminars, site visits. This one at the top right is at the Clean Energy Test Beds at the University of Washington. You actually see in the back that blue mass is then building their fabrication facility for pouch cells. So one of the first in the country that's easily accessible for folks to do testing there. We also do happy hours and workshops as well. You'll hear about an upcoming workshop later today that we're doing next month. You'll see these QR codes later if you want to scan them, but ways to get involved. We have our LinkedIn group, we have a LinkedIn page. LinkedIn group is if you want to post and share information with other folks. A page is more like we're posting links to events like this, so it's more of a follower format. And then our events calendar. If you RSVP for tonight's events through Luma, that's our Luma page there, so you can see more events on that. Duncan, back over to you.
Thanks, Grayson. I won't take too long, but just wanted to take a minute to introduce Rose City Robotics, which is the startup I'm working on that I mentioned before. And we've been working on Rose City Robotics for about a year now. I've been an entrepreneur for about 20 years, and one of my first startups was in the solar and storage industry, doing certifications and training education for contractors and engineers. And so I was aware of this problem with lithium-ion battery recycling. And so when we started Rose City Robotics, our goal is to automate processes that are currently being done by humans, that are dangerous processes, and particularly in the circularity space. And so we have been researching for the last year around electric vehicle battery recycling. And our goal is to automate that process using machine learning to teach the robots how to perform these dangerous tasks. And the EV battery recycling industry is really interesting. If you want to know more about that, come talk to me after. We're expecting in the next 5 years about 2 million tons per year annually of EV batteries end of life. And that grows to 20 million tons annually in the next, like 2040. And so all those vehicles are driving around on the road right now. And so they're coming, and we need a way to recycle them, and so that's what we're working on. We're also developing some educational courses, given my background in education, around batteries, as well as machine learning, solar, and various courses and training content. So I'll be sending more information about that as well. But again, anybody interested in talking about education, machine learning, robotics, or batteries, EV batteries, come talk to me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Duncan. All right. So one last speaker we're going to bring up here in a moment came down from Seattle today to share a little bit about what his group is doing as part of the DER task force, and we wanted to make sure he came down today so that you all could learn about other groups that are focused on both overlapping and adjacent programming, resources, and activities that you can plug into if you want to get more involved into the battery and battery adjacent sector. So with that, I'm going to welcome up Adam. Adam, take it away.
Thank you, Grayson. So it isn't entirely my group, and my role is fractional. So I'm going to talk maybe for 2 minutes about DER Task Force. So I helped organize the Seattle chapter last year. I guess I should stop just maybe introduce myself. Adam Morse. I do DER, distributed energy modeling design for a company called Protogen. I don't know. I guess I don't need to talk too much about kind of my role there. But we started this group, threw open the door. A lot of different folks came in. We have a small, maybe 10-person core group. Right now we talk about technology, policy, all the various challenges that distributed energy faces as a new technology for grid integration. So it's gone really well, and I'd love to spread this to Portland if anybody is interested. So the group basically got started several years ago. A trio of professionals started a podcast. It's a long-form podcast. It's really good. I encourage you guys to check it out. There's an annual event called DERVOS. 500 or so people gathered. Have primarily Mid-Atlantic. We've got smaller satellite groups: Toronto, Chicago, San Francisco, and Seattle. It's been really helpful for me to have a support network, a lot of people that are engaging the same types of challenges. So I'm here basically just to introduce you to DER Task Force. If you're interested, come find me.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Nice thing about the DER Task Force is they also do some subgroups that are focused on very niche topics, such as, I don't know if you say is a great example of one of the subgroup names.
Yeah, we're looking at open ADR. We're only as good as our current most interesting topic. So we ping pong around a little bit.
Yeah, so that's it. They do some great white papering on topics that are specific to the region, and even giving some good ideas of policy changes as well. So if you're up in Seattle, or you want to start write that down here, or not now. I wanted to do this at the beginning too, before we jump to our speakers as well, as you can see it on the slide here. Just by show of hands, I'm curious who today works in the battery sector. This could be a battery engineer, it could be a designer. Awesome, so about half or so of the folks here. Who here is totally brand new to the industry and has come in today to learn a little bit more about batteries? Or awesome, handful of folks as well, awesome. So I just want to point that out is that this is pretty typical for the events that we have for PNW Battery Collaborative. Is quite a wide mix of folks that have a lot of experience in the sector, as well as folks that are interested in joining into the sector. So I wanted to point out one resource. This is probably wondering what this whiteboard is over here. And so throughout the event tonight, the section on the left is classifieds. If you'd like to post a job that you, or your company, or a job that you heard about that's live, you can do that on the left. If you'd like to write down a little bit of information about yourself, that middle column is there, and that's where you could say, I'm looking for a job in this industry, or anything in relation to that. And then on the right are any announcements, like upcoming events, good resources. We're doing a book giveaway later tonight too, and the author is here, so if you wrote a book or you read a great article, you can post that there as well. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our lightning speakers. With that, each speaker is going to have up to 5 minutes to present on answering these questions. So Daniel will go first, but I wanted to bring up the questions here and give everybody just a quick moment to read through them. So I'll give everybody just a quick second so that you're familiar with each panelist. We'll be covering these 7 questions. If you have terrible eyesight like I do, I can read some of these off too. Seeing some thumbs up in the back for that. So what is your name? What's your position in the organization? What are you an organization working on in relation to batteries? From your perspective, what is your current state of the battery innovation in Portland, Oregon, or the PNW at large? What do you believe needs to happen for the PNW to become the nation's leading hub for battery innovation? Is there anything you would like to share with the group? Is there anything you'd like to ask of the group? So without further ado, Danny, kick us off.
Ooh, thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Danny Liu, Senior Vice President, one of the founders at Powin. What we do is we create utility scale battery storage systems, fully integrated with hardware and software. And we're really focused on the utility scale sector, which is different in application from the C&I sector, but also different from residential. There's a lot of applications for batteries. We're focused on the largest projects. What we do is we buy battery cells from various vendors, mainly from China right now, and we integrate those cells using our own battery management system, using our own battery module and pack designs, and then we scale these up to, the common form factor right now is a 20-foot container that's 5 megawatt hours in capacity, and then these projects often will have hundreds of these things, right? What these systems do is they help balance the grid in terms of intermittent generation, but it also helps you provide, in a perfect world, 24/7 renewable energy, right? That's really what the goal is, because without batteries, when the sun doesn't shine, there's no solar generation. If you build more solar, it doesn't actually solve the problem, right? If you build more wind, you'll still have dips where the wind doesn't blow, right? So having batteries at a large scale in strategically placed locations helps you balance the grid when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, essentially. And that's a very high level way of talking about it. It is really what the use case is. In terms of what Powin has built, we've deployed about 10 gigawatt hours of batteries globally. A lot of these projects are located in the US, right? Barely any in Oregon, but a lot in California, a lot in Nevada, a lot in Arizona and Texas. We just delivered a 2 gigawatt hour project in Australia that exactly replaces a coal-fired power plant in Sydney. Powin is a Portland company. We started in Portland. I grew up in Portland. My family lived in Portland for the last 35 plus years. We have our hub here, and we like to say that we've helped groom a lot of young talent to become experts in utility scale battery storage, whether it's product engineering, marketing, sales, finance. All these play a big factor in batteries, right, in helping get these deployed. I think the current state is there's a lot of opportunity in the battery space in all different facets. I think there's a lot of very talented and very hungry people wanting to do good for the environment, right, and try to promote the energy transition. And I think one of the best things about Portland and Pacific Northwest people is that we're all very focused on sustainability, environmental, and protection, right? I think there's a lot of activities happening in Oregon and Washington on batteries, all different types of different parts of the battery industry, different chemistries that are being developed. So I think there's a good ecosystem here. But I think really what we need to do to cultivate more talent and keep more talent here is like the work from home thing is great. I actually like it, but I think we need to define specific resumes and talent to fill in our positions. And we had to stop forcing people to move to Portland in order to find that talent. But if COVID never happened and work from home never became a common thing, I bet you probably at least 100 more battery professionals would be moving to Portland to work for Powin, right? For just one instance, right? So I think work from home kind of spreads out all of the battery talent and forces you to find it where they live, rather than traditionally you would have them move over here and then start this whole kind of battery type ecosystem, right? I like work from home, but I think that is one of the hindrances of cultivating and harvesting talent here, and that has been harder to work with, right? Yeah, I guess what I'd like to share with the group, I think utility scale storage is still in its kind of infancy stages, I would say, even though gigawatt hours are being deployed every year. Energy storage years I'd compare to like dog years, right? 1 year working in this industry, you see so much innovation happening. You see so much of our customers building these very massive projects. And I think as the energy industry evolves into more data center, AI loads, green hydrogen processing loads, there's a new amount of demand for electricity that just doesn't exist in the current supply, right? And I think those are really the initiatives that are going to keep propelling the storage space forward and allow for not just a couple gigawatt hours to be installed a year. Current day, I think it's around like 10 to 20 gigawatt hours installed a year, to hundreds of gigawatt hours installed per year. And I believe batteries can be deployed much quicker than a lot of other generation facilities. Like gas turbines have a 5-year lead time. If you want to build a new coal or nuclear facility or whatever, that's 10 years minimum. But batteries, from the time you contract it, you can deliver a 500 megawatt hour project in 9 months, 12 months. So it is very quickly deployable. It is more quickly permittable. And as long as you have the site and the interconnection ready, these systems can be deployed very quickly. So energy transition can happen faster. Policy might be getting in the way these days, which I'll talk more about later.
10 seconds.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess advice would be don't get too down on the tariffs. Everything's going to go up in price, but hopefully in 3.5 years they'll start coming back down.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. I like the optimism. Next, Drew. There you are, in front of you. Awesome. Thank you, Drew. All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Drew Leibowitz. I am a managing director at PowerSwitch. PowerSwitch is an energy storage advisory firm. So we work in a very similar space to Danny and Powen. But we are consultants who help mostly developers and energy storage projects to imagine those projects, figure out where that they can go, pick products. So we do some helping them evaluate all the products in the marketplace, many of which are Powen, but help them pick the best project, pick the best product for that project, install the systems, and then a lot of our work is focused around installed systems and dealing with some issues that come up. Some of the common issues we see once these systems are installed in the field are things like thermal management, which is making sure all the battery cells are kept cool, warranty management. These systems, it's pretty amazing, but the systems that Powen and others are supplying come with a 20-year warranty, which is like pretty mind-boggling if you think of like what product out there comes with a 20-year warranty. But we've seen some of the systems, like the oldest battery systems that are out there are maybe 8 or 9 years old at the utility scale. So they're still only about halfway through their life. So a lot of what we do is helping understand those warranties, make sure the testing is done properly, and when those issues do come up, sometimes we get involved in litigation support. So there are some lawsuits in the industry, and I've been an expert witness for those types of cases. I'm out in the field and like seeing how they shake out. And I actually find out I learn more on those litigation support cases than anything else, because they hire someone else on the other side to pick apart the report that I'm writing. We're a 5-person team based here in Portland, but we have a few people across the country. As Danny mentioned, I think the industry at large really is pretty diffuse and then spread out, just because a lot of the work can be done from anywhere. What do I think the current state of battery innovation is? Speaking more from the side of development of battery projects, which is mostly the world that I work in, I think one thing people don't realize about Portland specifically is we're home to 3 of the major offices for some of the biggest battery developers in the country. There's a company called Acacia, which is actually the company that built that really big battery that Powin is supplying. They're based in Australia, but their US office is based right here in Portland, owned by BlackRock. There's IPA Power, has one of their main offices here in Portland, and a lot of their key folks are here, and they're owned by Blackstone. And then there's Goldman Sachs, also is in the battery game and has Gridstore, which is just across the river. So like 3 of the really big players you don't hear a lot about, but they all have major offices here in Portland. But of course, they're working on projects all over the country and really all over the world. What needs to happen for us to become a leading innovation hub? I think the biggest thing is improving the pipeline of academia into energy storage. I gave a talk earlier this year at the electrical engineering department here. Students really excited, asked a ton of great questions, but I had the feeling that they just didn't know those careers are out there. So making sure that they know, hey, you could work in battery manufacturing, you could work in battery consulting, battery development, all these different aspects of the industry, and making it clear those are really great paying jobs, could take you really far, but like, how do you get into that field? It could be everything from chemistry to the research of the newest generation of cells, to a lot of it is business. A lot of what I do is not so technical, but more involved with making a business case for the batteries and how are the contracts structured and things like that. Anything I'd like to share, this is just hot off the press. Just a few hours ago, PowerSwitch launched a database of the 100 biggest battery projects in the world, utility scale battery projects. It's based on the top 500, which is like the biggest supercomputers, but every month new projects are coming online. Just to give you an idea, if you build a 100 megawatt battery, which is a pretty enormous battery today, that does not get you into the top 100. So you can check it out at best100.org or through my LinkedIn. It's a really cool resource. We hope to continue that over time. And asks of the group, I think, yeah, just to reiterate that aspect of academia. I try to tell all the young people I can, it's a great industry, spread the word, let them know that there is that pathway out there, and just really try and encourage academia to know more about the utility scale space and how students can get involved. Thanks so much, Grace.
We were with you later earlier about for the book giveaway. This is the author I was talking about, so we'll be giving away a book. Is it the pen as well?
Oh yes, I signed. Yeah,
awesome. Cool. Perfect. All right, for our next speaker, here's Tim. Awesome. Round of applause. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to take us on a little bit of a pivot because I am not actively working in batteries or energy storage. Instead, I'm Kirsten Madura, and I'm the president of a group called Climate Curious based here in Portland. So Climate Curious is Portland's sort of go-to network for climate professionals and enthusiasts across Portland, and that is what we were building it to be. As opposed to some of these other organizations, which are really heavily focused on the companies and the innovation itself, which is amazing, we're really focused on the people, the individuals, and that is the tie-in here. I met Duncan a while back through Climate Curious events and really bringing together Portland's not only battery storage and energy sector, but everybody who wants to be working in it. My background is actually in renewables. I have a master's in renewable energy. I started my career working with Navigant with Bruce back there on wind power and solar and other emerging tech. It was emerging at the time. And then went and did community scale solar with a local nonprofit based out of here called Green Empowerment, which I know a few of doing community scale. So I have had some experience with batteries, with energy storage, with renewables, but I moved back a few years ago to Portland from New York City and from other places that I had lived, and I just was like, where are all the people? Like, where are all of you guys? This obviously didn't exist. Thank you so much for putting this together. But I got plugged in with Climate Curious because there was not necessarily that ecosystem there. There was not a way to connect with other people who have similar interests. And I think there's a lot of progress that Oregon is going through right now and a lot of hope. COVID really did a number on Portland, which I feel like we all feel. But there are these companies, as Drew mentioned, that are based here that are doing really great global work. And so to talk through what's happening, we have a commitment to 100% renewable energy by 2049. We have these companies that are doing this amazing global work. But what I would really like to see happen in Portland is to have that really strong connection between the job seekers here, the startups here, and then the existing sort of established companies. So I'm curious from you guys, how many people here are actively looking for a job in batteries? That's actually fewer than I expected, so that's cool. But if you look around, those are people who, we're talking a lot about remote work, we're talking a lot about being able to do these global projects, but what I would like to see in Portland is that all the people here who just raised their hand get hired by the people here who are working in those companies. And I think workforce development is a really big gap for us. As we see more things come online, like more renewables projects, we see more EVs, I think there's really a lot of opportunity to, one, bring in local talent and keep them here. There's so many job seekers that I've met here who are like, I want to stay in Portland, I love Portland, I cannot find employment here. And it's only going to get worse with our current administration. It's only going to get worse as the tariffs take effect. So I think that some of the solutions here are really building these interpersonal connections, connecting you guys in this room in this way, and then having that pipeline that Drew was talking about, not just from academia, but from mid-level career, people who are in the mid-level of their career, people who are looking to transition into climate. 2 minutes, oh, it's ages. People who are looking to transition into climate from other industries, and being able to really be a connection point where we're like, oh, you're looking for a job here? Here's a company that's hiring. And then circularity is the other thing that I want to mention. Obviously, Duncan is working on a prototype to be able to help take the dangerous parts out of battery recycling. I think that circularity and accessing local resources, especially as these tariffs take their toll on our economy, is a huge area for opportunity. And I would like to see that actually be embraced and to be able to take some of these really negative things and turn them into opportunities for our local business ecosystem. So my asks, anything I'd like to share with the group, Climate Curious is open to everyone. It is not a membership model. We just have regular events. We are partners with organizations and collectives that are starting to have their own events. So I really want to see Oregon and Portland especially be somewhere where you can go to these events and you see familiar faces and you're like, I know that person, I met you in a previous event. And I think there are a lot of people here who are already starting to experience that, which makes me very happy. My asks of you guys is that if you are actively hiring, I have a lot of people who are like, I'm looking for jobs. Please come to me. I have people to connect you with, and I would like to be able to build out that pipeline that Drew was talking about. So, I don't know, did I miss anything? Great, oh, and also a climate community liaison like Duncan for the Metro Region Innovation Hub. So if you are a startup founder, how many people in here are startup founders? That's a pretty good number. So look around, also startup founders, if you have funding opportunities, if you guys need help and resources, come talk to Duncan or myself. climatecurious.co.
Awesome. I want to say one thing that you said, Kirsten, that resonated is, I think the importance of cities, especially with the change of administration. Much of my career been working at the U.S. Department of State, looking at federal policy for addressing climate change, most recently on Secretary John Kerry's team. And I think with the shift of administration, everything you just said about the importance of us focusing on Portland, of us focusing on the states, of us coming together like we're doing here today to address climate change, to advance sustainability, to ensure equity, diversity, inclusion are continuing to become constituents of our society is even more important today. It's the power and importance of us doing that is important. And we need to think global, but we need to act local. Excellent. All right, for our next speaker, Shelly, come on up. Woo.
Hey guys, my name is Shelly Whitlock. I'm the Executive Director of Development at Polaris Battery Labs. So Polaris Battery Labs has been around for about 12 years. We are a battery prototyping lab in Beaverton, Oregon. So we work with three main customer segments, the first being startups, the second being large material companies and chemical companies, and then the third being OEMs. So primarily what we do is we work with companies with varying chemistries. So this could be lithium sulfur, lithium ion, lithium metal, or sodium ion. wide variety of chemistries. And we work on all different types of all different portions of the battery. So this could be anode and cathode active materials, separators, electrolytes, pouch materials, anything we can imagine to deal with the cell, we work on it. So at Polaris, we also work with customers who may be doing novel things where it's very difficult to get into a cell the first time, and that's where process engineering comes in. So maybe they have a three-dimensional substrate that's very difficult to get onto or weld to, and Neon engineers on staff that can help figure out how to get that material into a cell in the first place. In addition to that, we also have consulting. We can help with things like business plans, design of experiments, helping get investor decks ready for clients, and also with things like expert witness and patent disputes. So I can relate to whoever was talking about that earlier. Yeah, so really that's Polaris in a nutshell. I also have another company in the Beaverton area, Iridian Labs, which has very similar services, except is really focused on that primary material. So Polaris, we really are hoping that company gives us a bag of material and that material works well. That's not always the case. A lot of the time it's not the case. But at Iridian, we actually have capabilities to upgrade that material to actually make it perform better. So we have things like spheritization, coating, different furnaces, and different ways to upgrade the material to make it perform better. So that's where kind of Iridian comes in. So from my perspective, the current state of battery innovation in Portland, Pacific Northwest is really that we have a wide variety of capabilities here. So just with Iridian and Polaris Battery Labs, we have a lot of cell capabilities. I know we have mobile power solutions, which does a lot of safety testing on cells. And then of course we have beyond that pack level testing. We also do a lot of autopsies for many of these companies in the area. And then we even have beyond that, Mayfield Bryce Lewis is doing more of the implementation, and I know we have companies who are working on software as well. So it's really wide-ranging. I think really where we're being hit the hardest right now is in the startups, and that's really out of our control. But really as of last year, we've started to see the amount of startups that we have just in this area and really across the nation go down, really just due to investor funding going down, and then now just with the federal tax money going down. So I think that's really leading into the next point, just what I believe needs to happen for us to become a leading hub for battery innovation, is that we have to work together to overcome some of these challenges that are beyond our control. So just without all of this money coming from investors or from federal funds, we have to figure out how the startups are going to survive. So I know we have a lot of startups here, Polaris and Iridian. Polaris is a bit more established, but even Iridian, you know, we're still a startup. So I think figuring out how the startups can band together, what resources we actually have locally, some of those are very hard to figure out here, and I think that's where maybe some of these resources, this collaborative can come into play. But I think that glue of how we all can work together here is still somewhat missing, and I think that's what we need moving forward. As far as anything we would like to share, we actually do have some space available. If anyone's looking, if there are any startups out there looking to rent space, we have some space in our facility. We've co-located with people before in order to maximize the use of equipment and things like that. We have lab, office space, and warehouse space available if anyone just so happens to be looking. And then any asks of the group, really, is if you think there's a way we can collaborate together, I would love to hear from you. If you think there's a way we can help startups, we have startups that come to us all the time asking for what they can do. We know that they're struggling with funds and different things. So yeah, if you think there's something we can offer to them or we can work together, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Shari. We were talking a couple of days ago about perhaps doing a site visit of Polaris Lab. I'm just curious, show of hands, who would like to go see a battery lab testing facility? What? A lot? Shelly, you in? All right, Shelly's in. Cool. All right. As for our next speaker, please welcome Tyson. Great.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tyson Bittrick, and I am with Mayfield Renewables. Mayfield Renewables has been around since about '07. Back then, much like Duncan was mentioning, our founder, Ryan Mayfield, was really looking at solar design as well as education. In the last whatever years that is, we've grown quite a bit. We're about 20 persons large. Our leadership team is all in Oregon, and over 50% of my colleagues are on the West Coast here, NorCal through Seattle, pretty dense there. We can put our services or our roles into maybe 4 buckets. The first, and a lot of people forget about this, I think, because of that education piece, is electrical engineering and design. That's the first bucket. The second would be technical consulting, and this could range all over the place, from electrical engineering to code interpretation to AHJ relations, product to market fit in some cases. Third bucket would be microgrid feasibility studies and research. And the last would be this custom education piece, which involves things like this event, as well as online, at your own pace type education if you need NABCEP credit, for example, those who are interested in that kind of thing. We also do custom education. We also offer monthly on retainer education for in-house folks, as far as developers, design teams, installers, that sort of thing. PV plus storage is really where we are headed, and I should say, unlike a couple of my colleagues here today, Drew or Danny, we are not in the utility space, and our beginning was in the residential space, but we're actually now solely in that middle space, the C&I, or the middle market, if you will. That's where a lot of our consulting and our design work has been heading for a few years now. Of those 4 buckets, I contribute to, in the microgrid feasibility team, I'm doing some of the in-house modeling to figure out, both technically and economically, what we can do on a specific site. I'm also a big player in the education team and some of the consulting services as well. From my perspective, I think the current state of Portland is pretty solid right now. I'm actually really inspired by almost the diversity of the battery market here already, and also the number of startups, hands up on them. I think that's pretty great. A lot of our talk today will be around lithium, but I think it's pretty unique to have some non-lithium or long-duration energy storage players in the market. Brendan, Ben, someone mentioned Skid earlier, and we've got some folks from ESS. And so I think it's good, and folks who are at EOS also in the Portland region as well. So I think it's good to think about all of the problems we have. Yes, lithium, full disclosure, I work with lithium LFP batteries mostly when we're talking about PV and BESS design. But I think it's good to have some diversity in mind for all of the various problems or challenges, forthcoming data centers being one of them to think about. As far as what I'd like to share, or I guess, what I would like to share, can I get a skip from me, my friend? So, all right, maybe how we can, yes, both, that works too. I'll start here. One of the ways to think about what engineering consulting looks like from my perspective is that for any given topic, there's actually a pretty wide table of stakeholders. I don't imagine you can all read that, but manufacturers, the national research labs, codes and standards bodies, our politicians and communities, the first responders, HJs, and installers and designers. And I think it's very good and important for us to have our ACEs in places and to do our work, but I think it's also quite important to understand for any topic, we have a pretty wide stakeholder table. This is just an example of a similar event that I was a part of down for Cleantech San Diego around lithium battery safety, but whatever your axe to grind is, if it's a tax policy or something, keep in mind that the table should always be inclusive. And it's the wider your peripheral vision on any of these topics, I think the more successful you will be and the business you're representing. As far as something I'd like to share, our new website at Mayfield went live this week, but part of the ethos of Ryan Mayfield himself and the company is creating our own markets, and the way you do that is you educate your way into markets. And so, yes, Ryan does teach 8 hours of natural electric code if you want that. But we can curate whatever your education needs are. For the second year running, we are offering a summit. Last year we were in Austin. This year we'll be in Seattle. And it's going to be the second week in October. And it's going to have 3 different tracks, about 12 classes, 2 days, so you can actually jump between. And there's going to be, of course, a lot of developers, engineers, installers, but the audience is as broad as you'd like it to be. This is their second year running. Last year was great. Live music, food, beverage, 2 days. So registrations come in pretty shortly for that. I think I hit all the things. I guess the ask of you all is, there's a variety of experience in this room, myself included, and so see all of your interactions as a chance to both teach and learn. And I'm quite thankful to be included this evening, so thank you, Grace and Duncan, and look forward to hearing from all of the folks on the panel.
Thank you so much, guys. And last but not least, Scott. I'm always like trying to find her. There you go. Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Mara. I'm a regional head of engineering for Portland General Electric. I think most of PGE is. We're the local investor-owned utility, vertically integrated, so we have everything from bulk generation all the way down to the service lines and meters on your house, and even some of the programs that extend beyond that. And so my job as an engineer and managing the regions, specifically the western or southern regions, when it comes to batteries and other renewable resources, is how do we make it work, right? Batteries are great, but they're only as good as the technology, the policies, and the practices that we have to leverage those resources to optimize using renewable energy to decrease load during periods of peak or add resiliency to the system when we have inclement weather. So what is my organization working on in relation to batteries? All kinds of stuff, right? So because we're vertically integrated, we get involved with grid scale, hundreds of megawatts at a time, all the way down to some of the programs that are installing batteries behind the meter and how we can integrate that into our DERs. You heard about distributed energy resources here. That's going to be hugely important for the grid of the future because we're running out of space for transmission lines, and those really aren't very popular. So you're not going to see the build out of large generation far out in eastern Oregon and then piping that into where the load centers are. So how do you make up for that? You put the load here. We don't have room for 10 acres of battery and wind and solar here. So what do? You break that up and you put it behind the meters. Put it in your house, you put it in Safeway, you put it in a hospital, and you integrate that locally so that you don't have to burn anything, you don't have to install transmission lines over the mountain, you don't have to put those bulk sources in. Now that being said, you still can't rely solely on DERs and you have to have those big sources. So what are we doing in that space? We are currently installing grid scale megawatt class battery installations. We just came online with about 100 megawatts worth of batteries, I think, in the last several months. We have another 400 to 500 megawatts, all at 4-hour dispatch coming online, I think, by the end of this summer, and we've got about a gigawatt worth in the pipeline for the next couple of years. So it's really exciting. We're moving really fast, and I just can't say enough about how exciting it is to see some of these renewable resources closely related to home, tied into your neighborhood. And if you're in the Hillsborough area, if you're in North Portland, you might drive by and see a big Jurassic Park wall with a PG sign on it. There might be a battery behind that. You never know. For your perspective, what is the current state of battery innovation in this area? Well, as an engineer, I like to quantify things with numbers. Can't really quantify that, but what I will say is it's really encouraging. I spent a lot of time in my career in the last 20 years working with wind, especially integrating with PGE and building that out in the gorge. And I think back about the early days in wind, and I want to say that I think we're at a place with battery development and battery deployment at a grid scale that perhaps the wind industry was back in, say, 2005. So if you think back to what was happening in 2005 with the wind industry, everybody was getting excited about it, but you didn't quite see as many wind turbines out there. You didn't really know what that meant. So I guess the message there is get excited, be patient, but get excited. We're on the cusp of a major windfall of development and implementation of battery technology. If you look back again at wind, 2005 was only 3 or 4 years away from what was a massive installation of wind. I think as you see needs for renewables continue to develop, you're going to see that tidal wave of batteries come forth, both in DERs and grid scale. So what do you believe needs to happen to become the nation's leading hub for battery innovation? I think it's been said several times, I'll say it again, education, right? Not just what it is, but how do we do it, but even for the engineers, and I've said this to several engineering schools, those who get excited about wind, those who get excited about solar, those who get excited about battery, often get tied up in the chemicals, the substances, and that's important. But again, how do you leverage that? If you're into electronics and you have a Raspberry Pi at your desk at home, in your hands, right? Think about inverters, right? Power electronics. That's what moves that battery energy, the battery capability into the grid, either at your house or on a grand scale. So look in the creases, look in the folds. Yes, batteries are huge and they're important. And yes, we want to have a sustainable green grid, but what's the connector? What are the policies? What are the services? What are the programs? Is there anything you have to share with the group? Job opportunities, upcoming events. I'm not hiring, sorry to say. I wish I was. But what I will say is stay vigilant. One of the challenges, two of the challenges I'll say that I see in my industry are policies and I guess I'll say misnomers. Okay, policies, that's going to be with legislatures, that's going to be with corporate policies. Advocate for that. Call your legislators and say, hey, we want policies that encourage renewable and battery implementation, right? The other is NIMBY, not my backyard. Everybody wants batteries, everybody wants wind, everybody wants solar, nobody wants to look at it. Understand that we're going to have some co-location sacrifices, right? It's going to be in your parking lot. It's going to be in your Safeway. It's going to be in your garage. But at the same time, there's a benefit to that because you can be an active contributor in providing for the services on the grid rather than just expecting your utility to do all the work and paying for that service, right? You can be an active participant. So we break down those barriers and what NIMBY really means and take ownership at a community level for our energy resilience. I think we'll get there. Do I have any asks of the group and advice for overcoming challenges? Move quickly, but be patient. Okay? I know it sounds a little odd. Move quickly in the things that excite you about getting batteries into your home, into your business, into your grid. We operate your grid, okay? But be patient because it will take time, all right? We talked about the hundreds of megawatts of batteries that are being developed. We can sign a contract today, but it still takes time to turn the dirt and get those things going. So move quickly and be patient. With that, I'm really excited to be here. I'm happy to meet with all the other speakers later and look forward to any questions. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you, Scott. That was great. I'm going to, at this point, welcome all of the lightning talk speakers up on the stage. We're going to do one of my favorite parts, which is some moderated Q&A, and then we're going to jump over to audience Q&A as well, so start to take those questions here. So, Danny, first question's for you. You looked at me with such, you're looking a little scared over there. It's a good question for you. Tariffs. How are current tariffs impacting the battery industry? And what are the broader implications for manufacturers and consumers as it pertains to batteries?
Yeah, I'm not just scared, I'm terrified. But I think it really puts the whole industry at a standstill right now, right? These projects take from a contract to things getting on a boat at least 6 months, right? So when your customer signs a contract, that means that within 6 months, you need to know what the price is going to be. And our customers are developers that then have to get financing for these projects, and then they have to know how much money they have to get financed. If that tariff all of a sudden goes from what you thought was going to be last year when you signed the contract, which was 7.5%, now fast forward 4 months later, and you're at 125%, right? your battery just over doubled in cost. Who's going to pay for that? Are we going to, like, our margins on these projects are anywhere from 5% to 20% if we're lucky. That does not cover 125% of tariff, right? I think it's going to be very hard for all the PPAs that were already signed. It's going to be very hard for all the offtake that's already been signed, and hard for the offtake that's been awarded but not contracted, because those were all set prices that everybody thinks are fixed. But then certain suppliers out there are willing to say, hey, I'll take on all the tariff risk, mainly a lot of the Chinese suppliers. But then once the tariff goes to 125%, they're like, okay, sorry, I'm not going to honor that by my contract anymore. What are you going to do? And we're seeing that all over the map. And I think really who's going to be pained in this are probably the utilities that have to end up paying more for their power when they thought they were going to have to pay a much lesser amount. It's going to be the developers who are needing to retrade these agreements and PPAs with the utilities. And it's going to be the integrators that have to flip that risk and try to make commitments that sometimes you can't bear. And it also hurts the battery suppliers, because a lot of the time they're the ones that are going to have to take this risk, and if they retrade on those agreements, you'll lose reputation. So it's painful all around. It's absolutely terrifying, but I think it's a level playing field and everybody has to deal with it. What Powin thought was going to work for us was we had these alternative supply chains, Southeast Asia. Originally, those were no tariff. All of a sudden, as of last Thursday, they're 32% tariff. And then we thought domestic, the whole thing about domestic is build batteries in the US. There's going to be incentives, it's going to be great. But those battery factories aren't built yet. And those factories will take 2 years, 3 years to build. And a lot of materials of those batteries still need to come from China, which then are tariffed at 125%. So even domestic batteries are going to increase in price, right? So all around, there's no bid solutions. Everything's more expensive, and all we can do is hope some trade deals get struck.
Yep. Just want to add one thing to that. I'm also terrified, to be clear, but from 2023 to 2024, utility scale batteries came down 40% in price year over year. 1 year, pretty amazing. And the expectation is they'll continue to fall in price. Certainly not enough right now to make it any consolation, but I did want to point out that on the bright side, we have a commodity that's getting cheaper, and that's not going to change. The hope is that tariffs will come down and will be resolved, but in the long run, I think this technology is going to continue to get cheaper, and that's just going to make it pencil out in more and more cases. You know, that I think in the long run, the somewhat of a silver lining.
Fortunately, we have some good macroeconomic trends working in our favor as well. Battery demand has been growing at 33% for the past 30 years, year over year. And certainly, we saw the biggest decrease in battery prices since 2017, just last year as well, down to about $115 per kilowatt hour. And there's, even in China, depending on the chemistry, the battery, the lithium iron phosphate in this case, has gone down below $100. So this is that point where the industry has said if we ever get to below $100 per kilowatt hour, this can be an instance where really we start to see a massive increase in batteries. And so we're just hitting that point last year, and now the tariffs are hitting at this moment. So it's interesting to see how this might play out. Shelley, I wanted to jump to you. We talked a little bit before about the impacts of tariffs as well. I'm curious, feel free to take this question in the direction that you like. I'm curious if you can give a talk about the market segments that you see being most impacted by the tariffs, or a particular battery technology that you expect to be most impacted.
Yeah, sure. So I talked a little bit about how we work with 3 primary market segments at Polaris. So primarily our startups, so we have these large material companies, mining companies as well in there. You have a lot of miners. And then our OEMs, these are like your electric car companies. Companies are very large. Really, as of last year, we've seen a dramatic increase or dramatic decrease in our startups. Really, investor funding has fallen dramatically. We can see this. We've seen several of them go bankrupt. We've also seen this in the news for a lot of these startups. And really, bulk of who we're seeing now are these large material companies and the OEMs that are making up most of our business right now. So in the past, we've usually seen a really healthy amount of startups that have made up a lot of our business, that this has just been dwindling and dwindling over time. And it seems like, at least right now, they're really not able to secure the funds in order to move forward. So I think it's just a really dicey time for startups, just securing that fund. The federal funding is just not there, which a lot of them really rely on, and the investor funding is just not there, which they really rely on. So really, only the large companies are able to make it work. They're pulling out of their R&D budgets, and they just typically have a lot more money to work with. I will say, even on the mining side, we're still seeing a lot of them struggle. So we deal with a lot of mining companies in Canada, especially, and then some in the US as well. Even a lot of those companies are struggling to find funds. And I think that's because a lot of them are also banking on federal funding. Not as much on investor for some of those, but really on federal. So even those, I think usually it starts to get difficult for them to move forward. Really large companies win again. But we'll see how it goes moving forward, I think. As long as startups can really buckle down right now, do what they can to make it through this rough patch, then I think we can make it on the other side. Yeah.
Totally agree. So on the point of costs and prices, Drew, question for you. I'm curious, where do you see the price of integrated battery, PCS, and EMS going in the next 5 years? And for those that are unfamiliar with what PCS and EMS are. Thanks to all of those.
Grayson threw out there $115 per kilowatt hour for batteries. So that's probably maybe a little hard to visualize, but I like to think like traditional battery in a gas vehicle is about a kilowatt hour, somewhere around a kilowatt hour. That's like what you have in there. And if we were to look back, let's say 6 or 7 years ago when batteries were really in their infancy, like utility scale systems were getting built, that price to install 1 kilowatt hour, first of all, there's the price for the battery itself, but then you need an inverter, which folks in solar know that's what goes from DC to AC, and of course with batteries it has to go in both directions, and you need some controls to go on top of that. One way that the battery costs have sorted out is you have a cost for the battery, the inverter, and the controls, and then the cost for everything else, sometimes called balance of plant or BOP. And then there's all the other costs to be like, I gotta get the land, and I gotta sign the agreement with the utility, and all these other things that have to go into it. But if we just look at the cost for that kilowatt hour of battery for the entire system around it, even just, I think 5 or 6 years ago, that was over $1,000. So in other words, Danny mentioned like a lot of the containers now have 5 megawatt hours or 5,000 kilowatt hours. So at $1,000 a kilowatt hour, that's $5 million just for that one container to get all fully installed 5, 6 years ago. Fast forward to today, and as Grayson mentioned, that's down to about $115. It's come down almost 10x. That's just, to be clear, that's just the components. Still, for building the whole system out, we'd be talking something over $200 a kilowatt hour. So, as I mentioned, the anticipation is those prices will continue to fall, and that just means that all these cases where batteries were, it made sense on the grid or even behind my house, but I don't want to pay for it, it's just not worth it to me. All of a sudden, when it's half, when it's 10, 20% in price of what it used to be, all of a sudden these other use cases open up. And one window we had into where those prices are going is they did like a 16 gigawatt hour procurement, which is like very hard to imagine, but just, this is in China, and they were looking for 16,000 megawatt hours of batteries. And so the leading companies come out and you have no tariffs, they're making them right there in China, shipping them out, and the cost all in, so that was the battery, the inverter, and the control system. It was around $65 a kilowatt hour. So around half of where we're at right now. So it's like, really boggles the mind. To be clear, some of those prices, they think like it's companies willing to take a loss just to get the contract, but it still is an indication of where the market could go. And at those prices, all kinds of different applications, the things that like Scott was referring to, like behind houses and in Safeways and all these things, they start to pencil out. So it's really exciting time to be in energy storage, and I think in the next 5, 10 years,
that's just really going to take off very quickly.
Awesome. I appreciate the optimism as well. Kirsten, next question's for you, and then we have a couple other questions. But I want to make sure that we have time for audience questions as well. So I'm going to ask this next question to you, Kirsten, and then we'll jump to audience questions. And if we have time, I have 2 prepared questions for you two gentlemen at the end. And Kirsten, I'm curious, you have a background in journalism. I'm curious, we haven't talked much today yet about the storytelling, the narrative aspect. How do we communicate as battery professionals or clean energy professionals with those that are less familiar about these topics? How do we bridge that gap and make sure that the general public is aware of the value that batteries can have in advancing a clean energy transition?
Yeah, thank you for that. Storytelling is such an important part of everything climate. I usually say that the climate crisis is a marketing failure. I think that the storytelling and communication side of things very easily gets lost. And I think that a lot of it is in how we frame it. Obviously, with the current administration, we're seeing everybody's walking away from DEI, from climate, from sustainability, from that sort of nomenclature, the verbiage. And I think that a big part of it is going to be how we frame it. I was just talking with somebody earlier today about how it's no longer like sustainable, it's system resilience. So thinking through what are the ways that we can talk through these concepts in a way that isn't so heavily reliant on the green ethos. I know it's awful to say that to a bunch of Portlanders, but if we really want to be able to communicate this globally and nationally, we need to be able to talk about all of the benefits that energy storage bring that aren't necessarily just, yay, wind and solar and we're so clean. It's also like we're resilient to tariffs, we're resilient to changes in administration, and talking through that. In terms of locally and federally, I think part of it is talking to the right outlets, building connections between Portland and other cities like Seattle. The fact this right here is what we need to be doing more of, and recording it and then sharing it with the proper outlets, I think is a huge part of it. I think getting in front of like the Bloombergs of the world, I think would be great, talking about what Portland's already doing. All of the startups in this room, having one central place. Catherine over there, who spoke earlier, has an amazing website that shares a lot of resources that I only just found out about when I got back here. So I think a big part of it is, for right now, the grassroots stage that we're at is about a lot about word of mouth, but really about documenting our progress in a meaningful way, especially if it's data-driven, especially if it fits in with the current narrative, as hard as that is to accept sometimes. We really want to get the message out beyond Portland and beyond Oregon, and actually including Oregon. We talk a lot about what's happening in Portland, but there's a lot of stuff happening around the state that we really need to start building those bridges. And then, yeah, documenting them in a good way. And Spencer back there does a lot of communication, consulting with startups and with people in the clean energy space. And so figuring out what that narrative is and level setting on a citywide level and then on a statewide level, and then figuring out the right outlets for that are probably the way to go.
One of the major takeaways from that is importance of community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally vibe with that. Excellent. I want to open it up for audience Q&A, and Tyson, Scott, I've got some questions lined up for you too as well. We want to make sure we have some time also to hear from the audience. So yeah, excellent. For questions, just because we are recording, we want to make sure that the camera can pick up what you're asking as well. So if you don't mind coming up to the front with the sides, this mic is unfortunately not wireless, it's a little tethered, so you can just come up, maybe right up front here. Thank you. If you don't mind saying your name, and then we'll see your question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Trace. That was absolutely fantastic. Mostly a question out of ignorance. I'm curious about the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions of different items of battery technology, and whether or not you think there's a commercial viability or a meaningful business case for emphasizing one over the other in virtue of all the way from the root source, the materials, to the actual implementation and the life cycle. Is it really better than gas generation? And is that a meaningful differentiator across different, or even is the delta between the different technologies a meaningful differentiator for you? Is that something that any of you are looking at, something about your point?
Any takers? Yeah, Scott.
a utility guy, I think I have to take a swing at that one. I think ultimately what you're asking is, have we looked at the carbon footprint of providing the materials relative to what we're mitigating by its usage? That's also an argument that the naysayers had at the Whirlwind Solar and Wind were coming online. And there's a fair argument there, right? Especially in the early days. And recycling wind turbine blades being one of the big ways that industry is trying to cut back on that carbon footprint. So with the circularity work that's happening, I think that's getting ahead of that curve a little bit and say, yes, we know we're going to have waste product. What can we do to eliminate all or most of that from that chain? I think in addition to that, we recognize as an industry, as an energy industry, that there's going to be some level of carbon footprint. So then the question is, what can you do to offset that, or more importantly, capture that carbon? And so I think some of the technologies aren't fully commercialized at this point. That hasn't quite penciled out in all areas that we think, but I think that might be the next tranche, right? As the cost of energy goes up, then the question is it cheaper to capture that carbon rather than pay the penalties for it? So are we in that space now? No, but I do think that that's maybe on the horizon as we start looking at what the footprints of all of these resources look like.
Any other takers to that?
I have a question for you guys, for those of you who are steeped in the industry. On that point, are any of your materials that you're using like taken out of the waste stream yet?
Like recycling?
Yeah.
Yeah, so our first project our first large project was built in 2016, right? So we're at about 9 years of operation right now. The battery is aimed to be decommissioned in about 1 year. We've done a few kind of demo recycling exercises where we've had batteries that are brought in for maintenance. We've had some defective batteries that we had to replace out in the field. And what we realized is at current day, the cost to recycle these batteries is severely expensive, right? It is more expensive to recycle a battery than to buy a new battery. And they charge you somewhere in the realm of like what, I think it's like $10, or it's like per pound you have to pay like a couple dollars a pound or something to recycle. And these are very heavy batteries. You know, what I like to say is that recycling is when the large amounts of batteries start being recycled, there has been a lot of decreases in cost of recycling over the last 10 years. And I think what the dream scenario is, in 15 years when the large scale batteries, first phase of large scale batteries are recycled, you can recycle those for free in the way where the materials that they recycle the batteries into are then sold for profit. So I think in the dream scenario, that's what needs to happen. And it is trending towards that direction. There is a difference in battery chemistry though, where lithium iron phosphate, which is very common for storage, the cost of those materials is just low to begin with. So when you recycle those batteries, the residual value of that new material that's being generated is not as expensive and does not generate enough profit for these recyclers, so it costs more money to recycle. For electric vehicle batteries, which are NMC batteries, those have more rare precious metals in them like nickel and cobalt, right? And then those actually can be recycled, and those recycled materials then can be sold for a much higher price, which then makes it more economic. Today, recycling is common, needs to happen. We do it, but at a very small scale, it's very expensive. But I think when the large scale of battery stuff is recycled, it will become more.
I'm holding myself back here because circularity is the thing I spend 99% of my day focused on. And I'll just say, the only thing I'll say on it is reuse first, recycle second. A lot of these batteries can be reused in secondary applications once their first application is done. You can take an end-of-life EV battery and repurpose it. Yes, it's more expensive than buying a new one, but the carbon emissions are half. The cost savings over the life cycle can be less than buying a newer battery if you're looking at 20 years to bigger scale. And also you don't have to mine as much, so there's social benefits too. So reuse first, recycle at the end of that. You can always still recycle the battery. Cool, I saw a handful of whole bunch of hands go up. I see 1, 2, 3. I think we have time. I think we can handle 3 questions. Let's just try to be brief. I want to keep us mostly on time. So how about Javier, let's go with you, and Adam, we'll go on it to you next.
All right, thanks. So my name is Javier Kovian, and I just recently came across this bug, and it was about mining, and I thought it would be appropriate to bring this up and get you guys' thoughts on this. So I was just wondering what thoughts and you guys have. I think this might be primarily to Shelly, because you mentioned mining companies, and Danny, because you procure batteries from China. But with the issue of like human rights abuses and slavery, child labor, and environmental degradation and procurement of cobalt and lithium and other minerals like that, what did you guys do about it? What do we do as an industry that we're trying to advocate for batteries at the expense of other human beings in other parts of the world? What do we do about that? Where are you guys' thoughts?
Great question.
Yadir?
Yeah, I don't think we can deny that it's a problem. We should always ask questions about that. So I don't think that denying that this happens is the way that we can approach that question. It does happen in parts of the world. I know for a lot of the new mines that we're looking to build, we are looking to do it responsibly. And that's one of the reasons why Canada is one of the top prospects for a lot of the mines that are being looked at, especially for things like graphite, is for very high ESG standards. It's not expected that's going to be a very cheap source necessarily. There are cheaper sources, which typically come with the things that you mentioned. So there are companies that are looking to pay a premium basically for these sources of graphite that have very high ESG standards associated with them. And then there are also other sources that are being investigated in the US even. There are some great graphite reserves in Alabama, all which should have much higher standards. And we really should be holding everyone to these high standards, but again, not to say that these things don't happen. So really, there's also other things that really I was gonna piggyback on that last question as well, and that there are also alternative ways of mining and different things that people are looking at, and we do see some of these that come through our lab as well. So just in terms of graphite, for example, there are some alternative ways of producing it, such as things like methane pyrolysis is one that we've seen come through a lot. This is being researched heavily. It's one of the very few ways where they can make fairly large quantities of graphite in a more environmentally friendly way. That being said, still not proven. So there's still a lot more research that needs to be done, and it's still not quite at the scale that you need for a mine. There's also things like carbon capture as a graphite product, basically, which is an extreme, if we could do that, all of our problems are solved. Pull carbon out of the air, use that carbon to make batteries. The problem with that is that we get very small quantities of graphite typically from something like that, and often it's not very good graphite for batteries. But there are things that are being investigated. All of those things are great. But really, to meet the requirements that are needed, we need to build mines. Mines are the only way we have currently to get these kinds of quantities that are needed, so we need to ask those questions. We need to make sure that they're doing it responsibly. So things like a lot of the mines in Canada, they have those standards, the mines in the US to do.
One thing I was going to mention was all these battery plants, the really big ones, they have to be financed. Financed by typically a combination of equity and debt, and both the equity and the debt sides are doing diligence on these projects. Everything from the products going into them quality, is the financial model right, is the offtake agreement, looking at risk. And depending on who the investor is, there's almost always a piece in those reports, and I've written some of those reports myself, of responsible sourcing of minerals. And it usually goes back to the suppliers, so Pallet or whoever is supplying these batteries would have a separate report that they call bankability to look into all these aspects. And one of those is looking into the responsible practices. And it's not every lender that is concerned about that, but a lot of them are. I mentioned BlackRock before, and I know they in particular have some really strict standards that they have to look at those things. They don't necessarily have to make a decision based on them, but they at very least have to bring them up, understand where the minerals come from. Is it traceable? And that is one of the things I think that drove the industry away, at least in stationary storage, away from the like NMC-based chemistries to LFP. It's also a lot cheaper and more plentiful, but that is certainly a driver is trying to reduce, especially cobalt, because of the really difficulty in tracking that materials and the known really serious abuses that happen in that in cobalt extraction.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I want to add is a lot of these ESG programs are being required now by a lot of the funds that are in banks that are financing these projects, right? It's really being led by who is financing the project, who is off-taking the projects. I think one of the things that Powin really requires is we do audits of all our suppliers, their supply chains down to 3 tiers below them, right? Sometimes suppliers will tell us which mines they're getting the materials from, sometimes they won't. And that goes into our supplier selection criterion. Other ESG programs are how much carbon neutrality is your factory? Do you have a lot of PV on the factory? Do you have wind on the factory? Probably most of these factories already have PV. So like only one that I've seen is totally carbon neutral. So I think in terms of what the big focus has been, at least in terms of battery production, it's called UFLPA, right? The Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act. And that was a huge detriment to the industry because it was on the US government radar, but the suppliers weren't necessarily being forthcoming in terms of which of their suppliers was actually in the Xinjiang region. And we have all of our customers sign what's called a supplier code, where our suppliers sign supplier code of conduct, which says we do not use forced labor, we do not use slave labor, we have safe working conditions. We make them sign this document, but then we also have to have third parties go in and audit these facilities to ensure they make the requirements. The ultimate thing is, if you're spending a lot of time and resources to make sure you're compliant, that's going to increase overhead, that's going to increase costs, right? And there's some level of inflection point where if you're spending all this time to make sure you're compliant, if you're investing in renewable energy, ensuring that you have it, the costs will go up to a certain extent. And then there's always a fine line between ensuring you're fully compliant at what price premium does ESG afford. And oftentimes, this is a pretty cutthroat industry. If you're 10% high, but you're totally compliant in ESG, you're still probably not going to win the project. But it's a very fine line. You have to be compliant, you have to do due diligence on it, you have to have third parties, but that alone is not enough to win a project.
Javier, great question. So we have time for one last question here, a few last slides to share, and then we have the space for 33 more minutes. There's still more time, and I want to maximize time for folks to be able to meet each other organically, meet some of the panelists in person, come ask some questions as well. So Adam, do you want to be that last question?
It's okay. I could ask, I had a question for Scott, but I could actually ask him afterwards, so if...
Fair enough, fair enough. Yeah.
Just ask a question.
Yeah, and just...
So I just wanted to ask the question. I hear a lot about big projects, and I heard a little bit about community projects, but I wanted to know if there's any more small-scale turnkey solutions for batteries that could be implemented within the community, maybe in the agricultural space or in urban garden space.
Go to the utility guy again. Okay, yeah. Since we've got Projects Large this fall, I'll talk about a couple programs that are maybe I'll say minimal investment to the end user, and one of those will be V2X, right? So vehicle to X, and in some cases it could be vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, using your EV as a battery. Now that could be a UPS for your home, should you find yourself in inclement weather, but also as a utility, we're interested in leveraging the storage capability of your EVs for grid services, for grid stability, for reducing demand during peak periods. And so these kinds of programs are something that are coming to utility meter near you, where you can sign up and take advantage of some of these programs and really, I guess for lack of a better description, get paid to serve as part of a grid battery. So that's something that can happen. Paying to co-locate facilities, I think you mentioned gardens and whatnot. I know that co-locating smaller facilities with other commercial, even residential facilities is one way to maybe offset the high costs of urban farming that might otherwise not be feasible. So there's those programs in place. Now that's more of on the development side, but certainly vehicle to grid is going to be a big one. And then as we've touched on already, DERs. As DERs move forward, again, that's going to be providing a grid resource at a local behind the meter level where that investment might already be inherent to the operation that you've got behind the meter, and it's simply a program that you sign up for to take advantage of those incentives.
Thanks for the question. So I think right there, yeah, he mentioned like behind the meter versus in front of the meter. A lot of the utility scale projects that we've been talking about are in front of the meter perhaps. And just to paint a little color on the company I work for, like I said, we work nationally, but even in Washington, in Oregon, one of our service lines is microgrid feasibility, which with batteries and oftentimes solar. And we've got some of our collaborations with designers and installers range from like community centers in North Portland, schools that want to become resiliency hubs for elderly folks out towards the mountains of east. We've got some places in St. Helens, and all of these are at KWH capacity sizes that I think you're talking about. Like, again, behind the meter, larger than perhaps a single house, but a community or garden or what have you. So definitely, the answer is yes.
Yes, I'll also make a plug for I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Twende Solar, and last year we completed a project called Dignity Village that's here. That is a community for unhoused people, and they put a whole solar system on there and off-grid for the sake of that. And I know that there are some initiatives through the Bonneville Environmental Foundation doing like community scale solar. I know that there's progress being made in terms of agrivoltaic solar systems over agricultural land, but I don't necessarily know if that's at the community scale. I think it's a little bit bigger, and I don't have an exact project to point you toward for that. But that's, oh, does somebody in here have one? Does somebody want to raise their hand on agrivoltaics? No? Cool. So there are things happening. I don't have an exact list for you, but yes, there are opportunities there for sure.
So one hand raised to that as well, so make a connection. I think I saw there are two hands that were raised on that.
Great, we're over here.
You got some friends to talk to afterwards. Also,
do you want to come up and talk about it?
No, we know.
I mean to the rest of the class.
And Adam, you should add on the whiteboard too a little bit about the Solar Punk Festival as well. Definitely recommend folks check that out. All right, to maximize some of that time, and also we just had one or two last slides. We wanted to go through some next steps information. So we're going to go through those, then reserve the rest of the time in the space for some organic conversation and meeting folks, asking questions. So with that, I want to, if you can, please join me in thanking our panelists, lightning speakers. Perfect. So a few last things to mention here. I mentioned already the whiteboards that are over here on the side. For those that may have come in a little late, on the left you have some available jobs. In the middle, if you are looking for a job, you can put your information there. Then on the far right, information about upcoming events, books, whatever else it might be, and announcements you'd like to share with the community. Next, if you're interested in being a speaker or you'd like to host an event, something like a site visit to a battery lab perhaps, please come speak to me after the event, and I'd love to help organize something like that. Additionally, I'm curious, because I want to keep this on time, if anybody has any burning announcements they'd like to generally share with the group here, give this moment if you'd like to. So just going down the room here, if you have anything, you can feel free to stand up and shout it out. Yes, in the very back.
I know you were talking about the whiteboard. Once people fill it in, they happen after this. Are you going to be able to kind of capture that and send it out, folks? Send it, or you want to?
Absolutely. So the question was, can we take a snapshot of the whiteboard and share it with everybody afterwards? 100%. And we'll have up on the screen here in a moment some QR codes you can scan to follow the LinkedIn groups, and we'll also post them on there as well. And there's also, if you want to look further back, to some examples of these. We do these at every event. We've had 2 companies get started and 5 people get jobs from just, I think, doing this 5 or 6 times. Definitely, it works. It's all shipment information. Thanks for asking about that. And then go down the rest of the room. Nope. Excellent. Lastly, there's one upcoming event that I want to flag in a moment. Wes, you're on deck for that. Drew, we're going to do the book giveaway. And lastly, we'll take a group photo. The group photo will be up front here. And James, our camera guy over here, will take the photo for us. Thank you, James, for recording. So I'm going to pass it over to Wes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wes. I volunteer with the Pacific Northwest Battery Collaborative. Grace has been organizing these amazing meetups for 6 sessions now, and really successful, and we'd like to start doing some small group workshops as well. And so we've got 2 coming up. They're both in Seattle. There will be Zoom versions coming up, and we'd like to have a workshop here in Portland as part of the Pacific Northwest Climate Week this July. And so these are both focused on really bringing corporate skills to technical professionals. We'd also love to bring some technical skills to corporate professionals, so that people who are in HR or I'm a communications consultant. I didn't start in batteries. I found my way into it, and it would have been great to have someone to teach me some stuff in the very beginning. Maybe the first few months of my job would have gone a lot faster. And so if somebody would like to raise their hand or make a referral to help us do that programming in July, that would be terrific. And stay tuned to your inbox for more information about this. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Wes. Book giveaway? There you go. I keep looking at it. Off to you.
In addition to being a consultant, as of last year, I am now an author. I realize I'm one of 3 authors that put together this. Is the best book, the Cell to Grid Guide to Utility Scale Battery Energy Storage Systems. And Scott's spirit of being an engineer and putting numbers on things, I thought a good way to do this giveaway is, if you were to add up all the generation capacity of all the power plants around the world, you would have about 9,000 gigawatts. All right. Hard to put your head around, but that's 9 million megawatts of power. In 2024, the numbers just came out for how many batteries with the total generation capacity of all the batteries in gigawatts were. 9,000 is everything. Who wants to guess? I need some brave souls to guess. How many of that at the end of 2024 was batteries out of 9,000? Anybody want to guess? The winner will get the book.
500.
500 over here.
100. 500. 600. 100.
100.
50.
50.
1,000.
1,000.
Yeah.
Any other guesses?
10,000.
10. 1,000.
65.
All right. One more guess.
$1.
$5,000.
The answer is 160. So out of 9,000, it's coming up on 2%. Not huge, but getting bigger all the time. And I think of that, it was like something like 60% of it was added in 2024. So it's, every year is growing. So I think Spencer was the closest. Congratulations, Spencer.
Awesome. Congratulations, Spencer, on your prize. You won a racehorse or I feel like we're auctioning off a ancient violin or something like that. That's great. Thank you, Drew. I'm excited to read the book as well. Excellent. Okay, with that, this is our final slide here. I want to again thank Rose City Robotics for being our co-host tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you also to our community sponsors and community partners as well. If you'd like to follow us online to find out about future events such as this or the workshops that Wes had mentioned, feel free to scan the QR codes here. We'll keep this page up. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Feel free, this is your time now to interact, make some new battery friends, and again, thank you so much.